Hey everybody, Darren from the White Hatter, and welcome to today's Thinkable Thursday. And today we are very excited. We have a special guest, Richard Guerry. He is with IROC in the United States, and he's been around now for years talking about the topics of digital literacy and on-life literacy and social media and internet safety, and we're going to be talking to him next. So, let's see and meet. Here he is in all his glory. There he is. And Richard runs a company in the United States, not for profit, IROC2, and I'll let him kind of describe what it is. And the other really cool thing about Richard, he has written just an excellent book. There it is. You can get it online. You can also find it on our website under Parents Resources. There it is. So let's bring Richard into screen. There he is, and he's joining us all the way from the United States. He's on the East Coast. I think it's New Jersey you said you're from, Rich. Let's let everybody know who you are, what you do. Let's hear some stuff about you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the privilege of having me today. Big fan, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share some information. So I don't want to get too much into myself, really kind of dive into the details that we're going to talk about today. But long story short, I was an interactive marketer years ago, more years than I care to admit. And in 2009, I had a juvenile safety company as one of my clients, but it was all offline safety. School asked me to come in and talk to their kids about sexting out of the blue. I actually thought it was a prank call. It was a school nurse, turned out, but I thought it was a prank call because she said she wanted me to talk about sexting, which I never even heard that term before, to be honest with you. And so I said, look, I don't know what you're talking about, but I've been working in technology for quite some time. So if you'd like me to come in and talk to your kids about technology, I'd be happy to do that. And so we agreed I was going to come in and talk about technology, but I did tell her I wasn't going to say that word, because if I talk about that word for 60 minutes, how does that help anyone in that room not become the victim of some other word that I'd never heard of?
Right.
And so I really just wanted to go in and talk to those kids about how they can use the power of technology to open windows, and really just, how they can use it to do good things. And again, as a marketer, an interactive marketer, that was our job, was to use technology to market and do good things. So when I left the school, I saw how little the parents and the teachers and the students knew about technology, and we were nowhere near this yet. I mean, nowhere near this. And so I did some research into what was out there for people, and there was a lot of reactionary stuff. It was like, sexting and things like that. And I'm like, look, we're waiting for people to get hurt, to slap a label on it, then come in and talk about it. I'm like, that's like giving the matches to a room of people, waiting for the school to burn down, putting a label on it, and then having an assembly about it. And I'm like, well, why are we doing this?
Right.
So anyway, long story short, from that moment, it kind of changed my life. And I resigned my clients, shut down my marketing agency, and started a nonprofit. And so the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. How's COVID affected what it is that you do? I mean, much like you, I'm into schools, much like you, and it's affected us for sure, right? Because schools are no longer. How's COVID kind of affected what it is you're doing through IROC? And what does IROC stand for again?
Yeah, so IROC, the reason we go by IROC, the 2 is silent. It's the Institute for Responsible Online and Cell Phone Communication. So we just go by IROC. And but basically, yeah, it's affected us quite a bit because we're no longer in schools. I mean, I used to spend, we did about 200 programs per year for 11 years. That's a lot of time on stage, and that has been completely wiped out now. So now we're readjusting to go virtual, to be able to provide virtual programming as well as reinforcement to those programs. So essentially what we used to do live, we are now learning to do virtually.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel
yeah,
I really do,
know.
Right? I really do. We've kind of made that path. But before we get into the questions, how are you and your family doing during COVID? Like I know you're on the East Coast, especially. You were kind of dead center into some hot spots that were going on in the East Coast of your country. How are you and your family doing right now?
Yeah, thank God we're okay. Where we live, it was pretty bad at the start. New York's kind of where it all started, and so there, like anything else, there was a learning curve, and thank goodness people were learning. And so, today we're a lot better. I think, as we were saying, New York, as of this filming yesterday had 0 deaths. New York City
Wow.
which is
Wow, that state governor did a good job there.
yeah,
I'll be in fact, your state governor is very much what all our provincial premiers across, we call them premiers here in Canada, they took on that same philosophy, and as a result of that across Canada, we were able to flatten that curve and keep it. So, but it's really good to hear that you and your family are doing all right. Like, it's
yeah,
really good to hear that. So, why don't we
thank
get into the questions? So,
yeah.
first question I have for you, Richard, here it is. Recently, you sent out a tweet that stated, if your kids have a Cash App in the social media bio, TikTok, Instagram, or Snapchat, it's a great time to ask them why. Why is this an important question for parents, and how can it lead to a deeper discussion within a family? Let's hear your thoughts.
So it's a great question. And more what we've seen and heard, especially as I was in schools, you would hear whispers of Snap Premium or OnlyFans. And, people say, well, what is Snap Premium? And Snap Premium is basically, it's Snapchat, and it's not some separate Snapchat app. It's just a version of Snap that people create. What I mean by that is you can basically get people to pay you, and then you will add them to your Snap subscription, if you will. And the reason a lot of times people are paying you to subscribe to your Snap Premium is because you are offering them something. And a lot of the time what is being offered is adult content. And so we'll also see, on TikTok, you'll see some maybe provocative dancing, or you'll see people doing certain things in their TikTok that they won't get banned for, but in their profile, they'll see Patreon, or you'll see Venmo. And basically what they're doing is they're using these cash apps they're using these social media platforms like Snap or TikTok to draw people over to their paid service. And their paid service is not all the time, but a lot of the time, adult content. And so oftentimes what I say to parents is, if you find that your child has a cash app in their profile, it's, communication is always important for any aspect of technology, but especially if you see the Cash App, it might be a good question of who is paying you and for what,
Yeah.
And what we see a lot of the times is, you might have like a $5 payout for something as simple as a foot pick, right? And so now we're in COVID, people are looking to make money. They can't go and get a job, so they might become desperate for money. But all of a sudden that $5 foot pick turns into $10 for X, and then $100 for Y. And then all of a sudden, you can just use your imagination to see where it goes from there. But just go into Google and put in the Patreon, Patreon, and then Snap.
Yeah.
And see what comes up.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think, like you said, having a discussion with your child is important, because they may have a paid app because they're a producer or creator of, say, a game or some code.
Right.
There may be a really good reason why they have it.
Right.
Having said that, I would agree with you. As an online investigator, we have seen an increase, especially during COVID right now, for something that the kids are calling survival money. Right? Especially those who are in high school or in college or university who had part-time jobs that they don't have anymore. So they don't have an income to come in to pay for rent, books, courses. So as a result of that, some are now turning to these types of ways, and we see it on Periscope as well, where it's the hook to get people in, and a lot of times, not all the time, to turn to some form of pornography. Like, we met a high school girl who was at an independent school who was doing that because she had a nicotine addiction to vaping. And she had no way to purchase her nic pods. So she turned to, she started with a foot fetish, much like you said. But it quickly grew from there to the point where she was now selling nudes of herself online to get money to pay for her nic addiction.
That's right. And again, and I'm glad you say, I don't want it to seem like everyone who has a Cash App is doing this, but it is a reason to spark conversation with your child. Who is paying you and for what? And it could be something parents might be blown away. Wow, you're a coder. They might have a whole experience about how amazing their kids are in gaming, but I guess the more dangerous side is, if they are starting with what seems simple and harmless as a foot pick, hey, I got $5, right? It can very quickly go down the wrong path. And then all of a sudden, you see the pictures winding up in Reddit, You see them winding up in other, I don't want to say Reddit's a dark area, but you see them winding up in some dark areas of the web. And honestly, when OnlyFans or Snap Premium content starts getting leaked, you start calling the wrong kind of attention to yourself. And when you start calling the wrong kind of attention to yourself, now you've increased your risk. You've increased your risk of predators, hackers. And so again, I don't want to paint this big doom and gloom picture, but it is important to start the conversation, because without that conversation, these are rabbit holes that your kids might wind up in, and nobody wants that.
But Richard, are you telling me that things aren't private if I'm using my private button on the internet? I'm joking. I know where you come from. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So how about if we go to the next question for you? So here it is. Do you think it is important for parents and educators to understand that teens today do not see a difference between their online and offline world when it comes to teaching media literacy? And the reason I ask this question, to be quite honest, is that when I talk to kids, teens, preteens, young adults, they do not see a difference between the online world and the digital world. Us boomers do, as the kids like to call us, although they like to call me a dripping boomer, so that's kind of a cool thing. But they don't see the difference between the two. And that's why we like to use the phrase on life. And that was created by a professor in Italy a couple years ago who studies this, because really it's one life, right? And so what I'm finding is that when it comes to educating on life literacy, we have a challenge, and I used to do it back in the years ago, where the way that I taught about safety online was different than what I was teaching offline. But I've quickly pivoted now, and I'd like to hear some of your thoughts and have further discussions on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you can basically look in the press daily about somebody who has lost a job, lost a scholarship, lost an opportunity, and also gained. I mean, again, I don't want to paint it all like doom and gloom, but the point is, what you're doing online is also a reflection of who you are offline. And there are many ways today, you as an investigator know this, if somebody really wants to take an interest in you, positively or negatively, saw an amazing film of something you did on a field, and an agent wants to take an interest in you, they can find you. Do something really horrible or racist, which we see. I mean, I feel like we have had a crazy uptick in some of the racist things we've seen online in the last few months. Somebody wants to find you, it's not that hard to find you. So you have to understand that what you're doing online, there is a very clear connection to who you are offline. And if you don't believe that, just take a look at how fast some of the people you've seen, sometimes they're called Karens or whatever you want to call them. Look how fast some of these people have lost their jobs because of what they've been posting on social media or someone else has posted about them.
And so why do you think, as an industry, we should be pivoting more to understanding this reality? Because I still think that there are some that don't get it. You get it. We get it. But why do you think that happens?
Why do I think people don't understand it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think too many people don't see this as what I call a window. I look at technology as a window to the planet. It's a window to the world. And what a lot of people I don't think understand is that windows work two ways. And so when you're looking out your window or you're putting things out, you have to also understand that windows work two ways and people can look in. And so you have to think about, who do I want to look in my window and what reason am I giving them? Am I giving them a positive reason or a negative reason? And so I try and help people understand that if you take that window and you put things out there to call the right attention to yourself, this is a huge benefit for you. But you got to understand, you can't have it where you want to put things out that are positive and have the right people look in, but then also put things out that could call the wrong attention to yourself and hope that nobody looks in. Like, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
It's, and so it's about trying to help them understand that don't think of this as a screen. Think of this as a window, and you use things like privacy settings and passwords and pins because you're trying to limit third-party visibility in, but you're trying to, think of it like frosting glass, right? So we use these settings to frost our glass when we're doing something we don't want the world to see. Right. And we unfrost the glass and we put things out that we're proud of. But what people don't understand is when you have all those settings on because you're trying to frost the glass because you don't want people to see, you have to understand that It's not like a solid shade or a steel door. People can still get, see through that frosted glass if you give them a reason to. So we try and help people understand that the things you're putting on or through that window, you have to understand it's a reflection of who you are. And if somebody wants to look in, they're going to. And it's just constant reinforcement of that mindset, I think, is necessary. Because too many people just see this as hey, this is me behind my keyboard and nobody's going to know it's me. They don't see it as a reflection of they are the face of that organization. They are the face of that institution when they are doing things through that window.
Do you also think that sometimes we adults believe that we know best, and when it comes to technology, and that we fail to give teens some agency on this specific topic? I mean, what we adults bring is knowledge,
right? Wisdom is what
and experience, which equals wisdom. But I think sometimes, and I know you don't, because I know that you turn to the teens as well to play an active role in what it is that you do as well, much like we do. But do you think that we should be doing that more, where we're allowing more agency for teens, preteens, young adults, to have more agency specifically within this topic area? Is there a downside to that?
Well, I mean, kids are incredible with technology. They've grown up with it. Their creativity and what they can do with these tools is astounding. They are doing things that past generations, they could only dream of doing. Wow. They're so amazing on the front end. But to your point, they are kids, and so they lack this thing called wisdom and life experience because they're kids. And so what I try and do, and I know what you try and do, and a lot of other advocates, what I try and tell parents you need to do is take your life lessons and your wisdom and help guide their decision making so that the tools and the power that they have with these tools, they're using it to open windows of opportunity, and they're not using that power against themselves. And so, of course, kids are going to make mistakes. This is part of growing up. The goal is to try and make sure that the life lesson they're learning isn't catastrophic. And some of the things that they can do with technology today, unfortunately, that mistake in an instant can be catastrophic. And so teaching, if you can find a group of students who are leaders to help teach younger kids, and this is what I always, when I talk to older kids, I try and help them understand younger kids look up to them and they will listen to them and they will watch them. And then if they can be leaders and role models and mentors to the next generation, then the hope is that the next generation, as they continue to grow up with these tools, will apply appropriate or proper mindset when they're using them. So, for example, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent here, but
go off on a tangent. I love it. I do the same thing. That's what we do.
Well, feel free to edit it. But when I talk to younger kids, a lot of times I say to them, like, hey, how many of you know it's not healthy to smoke? And every kid raises their hand. And I say, well, why is it it's not healthy to smoke? And what it always comes down to is, early smokers smoked. They created statistics about smoking for today's smokers to learn from. Today, if you're smoking, you are not making a blind decision. You are making an informed decision. I ask how many athletes, and there's a lot of people who say they're athletes. And I'm like, well, have you learned about a concussion? Have you talked about concussions? And athletes say, of course, we're talking about concussions. But when I was growing up, we didn't talk about concussions. Early athletes didn't worry so much about concussions. Why? Well, today we worry about concussions because of early athletes. In other words, the first generation pays the price for the next generation. And we're the first digital generation. And we've passed out digital tools to our youth. And like we do with every other tool where we give guidelines and roadmaps and an instruction booklet and a mindset, like we didn't do that with technology. We told the youth of our world, here's your evolving tool. Now you write the roadmap through your actions, and the next generation will learn from it. I think that's crazy.
This
right?
is why I've brought you into Thinkable Thursdays, because your insight is spectacular, and I think the viewers are gonna see that as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Next question I have for you is: parents are voicing how guilty they are feeling about the amount of time they are allowing their children online because of COVID. Is this something parents should feel guilty about? And is screen time a bad measurement when it comes to youth being online? I mean, a good example of this, Richard, is today there was an article in our national news up here in Canada where a doctor was basically shaming parents about how much time they're allowing their kids online during COVID, and that it is a recipe for disaster. Your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, well, I haven't read the article, so I won't speak
Yep.
directly to it. But what I will say is, not all screen time is equal. And I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old who went to school online. Um, so their social and their education, their scholastic time was all online. And for the foreseeable future, that is the way it's going to be. And so not all screen time is equal. And um, the way I look at it is this. In other words, you could have a 2-hour workday and you could have a 5-hour workday. So if your kid is online for 7 hours, one day it could have majority of that time could have been because of school, because of a school project. They were practicing band. I mean, there's a ton of different variables that are at play here. So not all screen time is equal. Um, but as I said at the start of this, communication is vital. If you're a parent and you see your kid is online from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, you might want to have a conversation about why. What are you doing from 8 in the morning till 8 at night? Have that conversation. What is your school schedule? And this way you can gauge what it is they're doing while they're there. But the one thing that I will say about an increase in screen time is what parents have to understand is there is risk. Like anything else that we do in life, there's risk. And I like to use a lot of offline examples to illustrate this point. So if you'll bear with me the metaphor here. Imagine taking a car ride from your house to a grocery store. Maybe that car ride takes you 5 minutes, right? And when you go to that grocery store that you might be driving defensively, right? And you're only in that car for 5 minutes and you're driving defensively, but you cannot control who's coming at you. Is somebody drinking and driving? Are they texting and driving? So there's risk. But you driving your car defensively is going to get you from A to B faster, more convenient. And that's why we have it. We love that tool for that reason. Think of it the same way with being online, right? So you might be online for a certain amount of time a day for school. Of course, there's risk in anything we do. The amount of time you're online is going to determine your risk. So if you go back to the car example, if you're now, instead of going to the grocery store 5 minutes away, you're going the entire East Coast of the United States. So 15 hours, 20 hours in the car, right? Now, no matter how defensively you're driving, you still have more risk because you are likely going to pass more drinking and driving or more texting and driving, more distracted drivers. My point here is that when screen time goes up, it doesn't necessarily mean that your kids are doing something bad, but you do have to, as a parent, be aware that their risk will by default go up because they are online, potentially connected with more people for a longer period of time. And like you can't control the increase in drunk drivers coming at you in the car from 5 minutes to 15 hours in the car, you can't control to a degree who's coming at your children in that 5 minute to 10 minute to 5 hour to 15-hour time online. So my advice really when it comes to screen time is I wouldn't feel guilty, but I would have communication. What is it that you're doing online to make sure that as a parent, going back to that last question we talked about with guidance, you can guide them towards lower risk activity and make sure they're not putting themselves out there.
Yeah, I really love a number of your comments. I mean, it's not about how much time, it's what they're doing with that time, right? Are they
Right.
being consumers? If all they're doing is consuming social media, to me, that's like bubblegum for their brain. Now, we all need to bubblegum every so often. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, I love playing World of Tanks online for a couple hours, right? Just to kind of
Right.
blow off some steam, right?
Right.
Or are they being producers and creators and change makers? In other words, if
Right.
my son is spending 4 or 5 hours learning and doing code online, that is going to be way better than playing 4 or 5 hours of gaming online where they're just consuming, right? I like to
Right.
say that consuming is like bubblegum for the brain. Producing is what creates critical thinking. It's what creates
Right.
creativity. It helps the brain to develop, like you say. But a part of that is understanding the communication factors, what you're talking about, and balance, right?
Balance.
So, and I really love how you're kind of emphasizing the parental involvement here, right? Because I do think that parental abdication on this issue is significant. However, one of the good things I see coming out of COVID is more parents are now engaging with their kids online and
Yeah.
seeing what they're actually doing and going, wow, wow.
Yeah.
You know, thoughts on that? Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. And it's great, and I think this time has given parents an opportunity to learn more about what their kids are doing online. And I mean, you can scroll through TikTok and you'll see, parents dancing with their kids, or I mean, you'll see a lot of really cool things that if our parents are working or there's the usual sports practice, there's just the time that we don't all have now. You see them definitely more involved. And just to add to that, I see a lot of adults that and parents who are binge watching their favorite shows. They're binge watching shows like Ozarks, right? Well, you might be binge watching it on your television. Your child might be binge watching it on their phone. So in other words, you and your child might be doing the exact same thing. You're just using a different device. So again, that's where that communication, comes in. Is it bubblegum, as you say, just a few hours of watching a show on Netflix and they're binge watching? Is it 5 hours of social media? Is it 5 hours of broadcasting on YouTube because they're trying to create online courses to generate revenue for themselves? There's a whole litany of things they could be doing online, but without the communication, you're not going to know. But this time has given parents time to take an interest in what their kids are doing. And I think those parents that are taking an interest and are asking the questions are learning a lot of what people like you and I already know.
What's kind of funny, I had a parent connect with me not too long ago. He goes, I don't know how my son can play 2 hours of Fortnite on his computer for 2 hours. And I said, well, I know that you love NASCAR, and so you can sit in front of a TV and watch a car make a left turn after another left turn after another left turn for 500 miles for hours, right? At least your son is he's integrating with other people. He's thinking strategically. And once I reframed that, the parent went, never thought about that before. I had another parent, Rich, come up to me and go, you know what? I hated this game, Fortnite, but during COVID, I started playing with my son. I actually like it now, right? Yeah. It's kind of funny, right?
Yep, absolutely. And honestly, you might not even know what you're doing in the game. I mean, a lot of kids, I know my kids, even if you're just sitting there watching them or you're trying to play, they're gonna appreciate that.
And in fact, Dr. Markey yesterday, Patrick Markey, who does all his research on gaming, emphasized that very fact as a parent. He says, as parents, even if you don't want to participate, or at least be there to watch, because that just gives huge parent credit, right? It's all about that interaction with the kids. Some great comments. Next question I have for you. What have you witnessed youth doing in today's online world, especially during COVID, right? Like we hear all this bad stuff that kids are doing. That's usually what hits the media. But what about all the cool stuff? Like, let's talk about the cool stuff first rather than some of the less than desirable stuff.
Yep. Well, I've certainly seen a number of youth advocate for change. And, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the U.S. and around the world, there's a lot of change, cultural change, conversations taking place. And I've seen a lot of advocacy. I've seen a lot of people, regardless of what side you fall on, taking an interest in politics.
Just on that, just to cut in for a second, specifically on the change. As you know, I come from a law enforcement background, retired 4 years. I absolutely agree that there needs to be change in law enforcement as well. And I want to be perfectly clear on that, right? And I think a lot of what these young people are voicing specific to policing, we need to be looking in the mirror. So sorry to kind of interject there, but I think it's important to say that, although what's interesting about what's going on, it's not just the youth, it's all ages as well, right? So sorry about that, but continue.
Yeah, no, I just, seeing youth. So, when I was growing up, not that I want to age myself, but, MTV had this thing called Rock the Vote because you just could not get it. You couldn't get youth involved in politics. Well, you can go on to TikTok right now and scroll and you will be shocked at how much youth is taking. Again, if you put your politics aside and your opinion aside and just look at it objectively at youth taking an interest in politics, this is something you're going to see is happening across the social media landscape. And so that, for one, I've also seen a lot of youth putting together tutorials, gaming tutorials. They're putting together online courses and classes to generate revenue. They're putting together how you can basically use Facebook ads to make money. There's a variety of different home businesses or side businesses that you will find youth are actually creating and putting out there to teach others. And it's just a testament to, again, how amazing youth and creative youth can be with technology, and how they can use it to open windows of opportunity. And if I don't mean to do this to like shamelessly plug anything, but
plug away.
You may have heard of a woman named Shelby Rassler, and we did an interview with her on our podcast. I think it was episode 3. And this young lady was her college closed. She went to the Berklee College of Music in Massachusetts. College is closed. She's a senior. On the flight home, she has an idea to do a virtual performance, and she selects the song "What the World Needs Now" by Burt Bacharach. So she reaches out to her friends through social media, Facebook, who wants to be involved. She gets about 70, I think 75 was the final number, 75 people. And they put together this virtual performance of Burt Bacharach's "What the World Needs Now." You can Google this, or you can even listen to her story on our podcast. But the point is, this is an illustration. This young lady has now become a global phenomenon. She has been accepted to Juilliard. She is doing media across the globe, from as far as Australia to here in the States, locally in Massachusetts. She did something profound. She had an idea on an airplane, used social media to put it together. And of course, she did a lot more work. I don't want to simplify what she did. But when you ask me for an example, she is a glowing example of what youth can do with technology to make change, and the kind of change that I've been trying to make in the 11 years of my life doing this job, to help people understand that these are the types of things you should be making public and permanent. These are the types of windows that you can open for yourself if you use it the right way.
One of the things I like to say to parents is the majority of our kids are doing super, uber cool things online. They really are. Yeah, there's a small percentage that aren't. We need to talk about that. But the vast majority of them are. And we older adults need to start acknowledging that fact. Because I think too many older adults believe that our kids are up to all this horrible mischief, all this evil stuff online. No, they're not. The majority are doing really cool stuff, but a small percentage are. Now, what are some of the less than desirable things you've seen some of the youth doing?
Well, I mean, number one, I've seen a lot of racism online, unfortunately. I've seen a lot of people filming other people and putting them online without their knowledge. And I don't think, and this could again lead down a whole nother tangent here about empathy and mindfulness, which I think we actually will talk about.
It's the next question. Don't jump ahead.
There you go. I mean, maybe I'll use it to segue into that, but I mean, basically, you'll see a lot of people who are secretly filming other people, and then they're putting them online. Yeah. Some of it is clearly, what their subject that they're filming is doing is clearly inappropriate. Some of it is, 10 seconds edited out of what could be a 5 or a 10-minute situation to potentially ruin somebody. So, I've seen a lot of the typical inappropriate stuff that you'll see, nude photos being passed around and leaked and things of that nature. You see a lot of that going around. But the thing that's been more concerning for me is the amount of people that are now filming other people, and they're putting them online, again, sometimes in complete clear context, and you can tell exactly what's going on, and these people need to be held accountable. George Floyd is a perfect example of that. But you'll also see examples of, you can see that this clip was modified or edited, or you're only getting like 10 seconds of an entire situation, and then this person in the court of public opinion is being destroyed. So there's no context around it. And these are some of the concerns that I have.
Prior to COVID, we saw a lot of teacher baiting starting to take place in classrooms, right? Where kids are purposely working in teams, setting up teachers to get them to act inappropriately that they were catching on video, then putting it on YouTube. And then principals and sometimes school districts had no other option other than to discipline teachers, which kind of leads into the next question. Nice segue. Is how can parents promote digital mindfulness and empathy given the political and racially charged online world that teens now find themselves today?
Yeah. So this to me is extremely important. Our ability to film and share others is becoming faster than our ability to film and share ourselves. I mean, there are wearables like Snap, Specs, and others where you would not know that somebody was filming you. And what I try and help people understand is that if you want to be able to go out into the world and just be human, you want to go to a party and have fun, or a wedding or a karaoke night, and you don't want people to film you and just put you online because they think what you're doing is funny. If you want other people to stop and think first with empathy and on mindfulness, what you're doing right now is hysterical. But if I do film you and put you out there, could I get you fired, thrown out of school, lose you a scholarship, lose you a job? I don't think enough people, and again, this goes back to what I was saying, we're kind of creating the learning curve for every generation that comes next. As the early smokers and athletes, if you will, of our time, as the first users of these evolving technologies, we're creating the learning curve. And what's happening, I think, is, and it's becoming more and more frequent, and it's problematic, is that people are just filming other people and putting them online and not stopping to think about the potential consequences for those people. And again, I don't want this to be misconstrued as filming injustice like what happened to George Floyd. I'm not talking about things like that. I'm talking about if you go to Google and you put in a search for, let's just say, woman gas can or woman gas tank comedy or something like that, what you're going to find is that very recently, a woman was pulling around trying to fill her minivan with gas. And for about, for 2.5 minutes, she's going around. And the people who are filming her, they're laughing at her. And then they put it online. So they never stop to get out and help, or at least that we see on the video. They just put it online. And what I try and help people understand is that while, yes, that might have been funny, did you ever stop and think, what if that was me? And did you ever stop and think that this woman is now like the first page, multiple pages of Google and search results? Did you ever stop and think that if you freeze frame her license plate or her face, you can find out who she is and where she lives? Did any of that go through anybody's mind? Or was it just, this woman is hysterical, she can't figure out where her gas tank is, let's film her and put her online? And so again, I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer here, but what I don't think enough people understand is that when you do put people online, it is not that hard to find out who they are. And if you look at some of the people who have been ranting and raving racist things, you can just look how fast they were fired, right? In fact, it happened not that far from where I live. There was a guy reenacting the George Floyd murder right here in New Jersey. Within a few hours, they found out they were two brothers. One worked for FedEx, and I forget where the other one worked for, both suspended and fired. So are you stopping to think before you put someone online with any form of empathy, what damage could this do to this person?
Okay, so I agree 100% with your comments, but I'm going to push back a little bit. Here's what I've heard from students. Mm-hmm. Here you are talking about this stuff, but our political leaders are not doing any of this. They're not showing any kind of mindfulness. No kinds of empathy. So here you are, adults are preaching to us that you want us to do it, but yet you adults aren't.
Right.
Like, that is a challenge.
It's a huge challenge. It's an enormous challenge.
Here in Canada as well. Like, I'm not just saying your country, but no. I mean, we have politicians that just aren't modeling this, right? And including other adults, right? And so we get the pushback from the kids. I'm sure you're getting it as well. So let's drill down on that one.
So there's politicians, there's teachers, there's parents. There is no shortage of examples. And what I always try and illustrate is, well, look at the consequence. Now, again, some people in leadership have not yet faced their consequence that is potentially out there. And again, I don't want to get too political, but oftentimes, so a story that came out of Oregon, a woman was telling me, one of the teachers in the school, having relationships online with students. She was recently divorced. She was having a relationship with one of the other teachers. He happened to be married. Long story short, it was discovered that she was having these inappropriate relationships, started with online, wound up being fired. Again, going back to some of the people who are ranting and raving, just insane racist stuff online. Their faces are being freeze framed. People are like, Twitter, do your job, do your thing. Within a few hours, they're discovering who these people are. They're facing consequences. So what I try and help youth is I help use these people, or I help them see these people as an example of what not to be, and to help them understand that there are consequences for their actions. But then I also try and point out the positives as well, like Josh Jacobs, who was homeless, put his game film online, gets recruited to Alabama, now plays in the NFL, and recently bought his dad a house. So I try and help them see that there are both, there's consequences, both positive and negative. There's, cause and there's effect. And what we try and do is fix cause, the mindset, how you use that technology, by showing some of the effects of your decision making. But you're absolutely right. We have far too many people setting the wrong example, and that's because, again, we are creating the learning curve for everybody who comes next.
And it's definitely made your job and my job a little bit more challenging, hasn't it? Right?
Let me tell you right now, when I walk into a school and I see posters everywhere, right? There's all these, and they're great posters. Like there's a reason the posters are there, like respect, loyalty, there's great acronyms. But when you're walking through that school and you're seeing all these positive posters and these things you're trying to, put these kids in this environment, and then to your point, there are leaders in the school or in politics that are completely going against what you're trying to teach in these schools. To your point, why are they going to listen? And so that's why, I said to you this when we were talking prior to this, it really does take a village. It does. And every single person listening to this, you don't have to be a safety advocate or a police officer. You could be a parent, a leader, you could be a teenager. Yeah. That's why it's so important you be a leader to that person younger than you.
Great discussion. Next question I have for you is, I know none of us have a crystal ball, but what are some of the offline challenges you see on the horizon that we should all be aware of? And how do we prepare for these challenges? I think you kind of started to get into it with the recording side of things, but let's kind of drill down and build a little bit more on that. Like for me, I'll be honest, I've seen it used to be all about predation, strangers, violence in video games, causing violence, which, most of the research has now proven that's not true. What I see are things surrounding extremism, pornography issues. I'm now starting to see gambling start challenges, right? Loot boxes and some of the things that are going on in, say, the new GTA, Grand Theft Auto with their casinos. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, so everything you just mentioned. So one of the things, just going off of what I was just talking about with the lack of empathy and other people, filming other people and putting them online, I'm also starting to see a lot of technologies coming out of Samsung and Disney, which make deep fakes basically something you can make in your home. And when you start deep faking videos, I mean, it's kind of like the old form of Photoshop, but now you can make videos of people. I see that as terrifying. To be honest with you, you could literally destroy somebody's reputation because, again, it comes down to the court of public opinion once something is out there. So the ability for us to film others, like for example, Snap Specs. This is a pair of glasses, has cameras built into them, so I'm wearing sunglasses at the beach. All of a sudden I hit a button. Now I can record anything I'm seeing. And these are there are far more fluid technologies. In other words, you can put a pen in your pocket and has a camera built in. You're starting to see in Airbnbs hidden web cameras and hidden cameras being discovered. Like I said earlier, our ability to film others and affect others' lives is becoming faster than our ability to affect ourselves. We take that selfie. And so this is where one of my deepest concern comes from. Yeah, online gambling is another issue for sure because it's at your fingertips. But if you're asking me my biggest fear, that would be it.
Can you just put those glasses on again for me? Those are the Snap glasses, right?
So this is Snap Specs version 2. Yeah. And basically it takes stills and video. And the one thing I'll show you about Snap Specs in that it's not as big a privacy issue as like Google Glass used to be, because if I start recording, you can see the light unless I found a way to take those off. Yeah, you shut them down.
Has anybody ever said to you when you put those things on that you look like Billy Joel?
No.
That's the boomer. A lot of the young kids are going, "Who's Billy Joel?" Right? But you look like Billy Joel there.
Oh man, well I'll take that. I wish I had his money, but yeah, I'll take that.
But those those are things though. It's like you say, the technology that is now out there to allow people to use it covertly and to weaponize technology.
Right. Exactly. You have Samsung, you have Sony, Google, for years they're fighting over patents for contact lenses that'll have cameras in your eyes. I mean, we're basically in our infancy of technology. As advanced as a lot of people like to think that we are, we're really still in our infancy in where we're headed. And this is why, this mindfulness, this digital consciousness that we try and create or cultivate this is why we find it so important, because I like to use fire a lot as an analogy. And again, I'm going off on a tangent, so I
Go,
apologize.
baby, go.
I use fire a lot as an analogy, and here's why. All right. This right here could be a book of matches. It could be a candle. Let me make sure. There you go. It could be a candle. It could be a book of matches. It could be a lighter. The tool really becomes irrelevant. When the tool becomes serious is when the fire comes out of it, right? When fire comes out of this device, there you go. You have a mindset to go to. Your mindset is playing with fire can burn. You understand that if you put your hand over this on a cold day, it's going to feel great. Put your hand in it, it's going to hurt. When you have a mindset to understand how to use the tool, you understand the pros and the cons, then the tool becomes irrelevant and you're able to use the power responsibly. And so I look at technology as the 21st century flame. And the tools and the apps, of course, we want to know what our kids are using, but the tools and the apps, at some point, they become irrelevant. The mindset and how you use the power that they bring you is what's important. And the reason I say that is because every day new technologies are being created. And as I said, it is becoming faster and easier for not just us to affect ourselves, but to affect others. And so for the same reason, you might go into a restaurant and don't worry about that candle on the table. Why? Because we're not new at fire, man. We get it. Because a long time ago, once this was discovered, we learned from our mistakes and we understood how to harness this.
You know what? I love the analogy of the flame. One of the things I get parents still asking, Darren, what's the most dangerous app out there? What's the most dangerous social network? Here's what I say to people. It's not the app, it's not the tool, it's not the social network. It's how you use that tool, that app, that social network that makes it dangerous. So that's why I like your philosophy of teaching, if the young person has good on-life literacy, then it doesn't matter the tool being used.
Right. That's exactly right. Different apps might have a higher degree of risk when it comes to if there's a higher level of predators there based on human behavior. Kik is a perfect example.
Yeah.
A perfect example. But how you're using Kik is going to determine what level of risk you will enter through that, like I was saying earlier, that window.
Yeah.
So what you're doing with Kik is going to determine your level of risk. It's going back to, again, why I use a driving analogy a lot. Those two yellow lines are there to separate us. And we have this social contract that, you don't cross the line. But if I'm driving drunk or texting and driving, if I'm driving being irresponsibly, I might cross the line and hurt somebody. My actions are going to determine my risk and the risk of those around me. Well, it's basically the same thing in the digital world. Your actions are going to determine your risk. So what level of risk are you willing to incur?
As a family, right? For younger kids, right? For younger kids. Next question I have for you is, you know what? As technology evolves, how can parents keep pace to help motivate youth on its responsible use? I love research, I love reading, I love academia and stuff, but one of the challenges I have with academia is that they're studying a topic, by the time they come out with the report, it is already dated, right? Now, having said that, it's slow for a reason because it needs to be because of the scientific method. But given that technology is changing all the time, I would like to hear your thoughts on this specific question.
So this is kind of, where I was going in the last question. Parents are never going to know everything their kids are using. There is no possible way for you to know every new website, every new app, every new trend. There's always going to be, and again, it's not to say you shouldn't want to know, but there's always going to be a new meaning for an emoji, right? Like now we used to have all these acronyms. Now there's emojis that mean different things. It's not to say that you shouldn't want to know what these things are. But again, like you said, statistics are always going to change. New apps are always going to come out. And if you're trying to keep up, you are going to lose your mind. This is why, again, we try and install
You'll lose your hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't suffer that problem, but some of us do.
I'm getting there. It's definitely gray. I have to cut it short to try and hide it. But this is why again 11 years ago when we started this conversation 11 years ago, why I left the corporate world is because I didn't want to live in a world where we were reacting to the newest trend, the newest app. I wanted to try and create a world where we were installing a mindfulness on how to use some of the world's most powerful tools. These things eliminate space and time technology. It gives you incredible power to speak to a planet. It gives you the ability to open windows of opportunity that previous generations really never would have thought possible. This is incredible power that people have to understand and appreciate. And if you don't have the mindset to understand how to appreciate and wield that power, you can do some severe damage to yourself in a moment. This is something previous generations never had to worry about. So if I have any advice for parents, communication is key, but it's not about knowing every new app. It's about installing a proper mindfulness to understand how to use that technology. Our mindset, our mantra is public and permanent. Why do I say that? Is to say, not everything you do is going to be public and permanent. But the mindset should never be, oh my God, what happens if what I just did becomes public and permanent? Because you just put it on a tool that was built for communication. Your mindset, your expectation should be, how can I create something that makes me look amazing and then want to make that public and permanent to open a window like the young lady Shelby I told you about earlier? And if we could adjust people's thinking from, how do I hide something that might be catastrophic to me in a world that was built from the ground up for communication, to how do I develop skills in a world of communication to communicate to the world my thoughts, my gifts, my ideas, and my creativity? If that shift in mindfulness happens with these tools, then you will see a lot of the studies and the statistics. Well, you'll see a lot of the problems that we have will go down. There's never going to be a risk-free digital world. That's like saying you can get in your car and there will be no risk. I mean, that's impossible. But we can lower our risk through action and mindfulness. And so that's what we're trying to do.
I like to say, principles stay the same, diverse in application. As long as those principles are sound, then it doesn't matter what application or tool I'm using, right? And
Sure.
and that is important. And I truly appreciate your thoughts on that issue. You know, one of the things we try to share with families and teens now is, don't think about how am I going to hide stuff on the internet. It's all about, especially for teens that are getting into grades 10, 11, and 12, it's about showing the world who I am. So it opens up university, college, and employment opportunities, right? So
Exactly.
we think, you know, at those ages, that's where we should be going. It's not so much teaching safety per se to the kids. It's more about brand and leveraging social media in a positive way to your advantage.
That's right. And if I could add to that, everything that you just said is exactly what we believe as well. Your criteria for social media shouldn't be, I won't put this on a college application or a resume. It should be, why wouldn't I want to?
Yeah.
In other words, if I'm an evaluator, right? So I come from the corporate world. If I'm an evaluator and you don't put your social media on your application, your resume, what it says to me is either you don't know how to use it, which could be a problem, or you do know how to use it, you just don't want me to see it. And that's the kiss of death. Because
and if you do, and if you don't have any kind of social media platform, I know a lot of employers, like I do background for and companies who will connect with us to do backgrounds, right? And if you don't have a social media platform, then I'm thinking one of two things, I'll be honest with you. I'm either thinking you're weird or you're hiding something.
hiding. Right. Exactly. And so that's why I tell people, if you do put that social media, if you want to put that social media and proud to put that social media on your application, your resume, one, it shows you know how to use it. That's a plus. And two, it shows you know how to use it responsibly.
Yep.
And that's a huge double plus, because you will go up against people who won't put it on there. And that is a red flag for a variety of reasons.
Big time. And it's really nice to see now, like we teach a program, much like we teach a program called Leveraging Social Media for College, University, and Employment Opportunities, right? And we really target 10, 11, and 12, grade 10, 11, and 12s for that. Because I do think that there needs to be that move now, because we now know that college, universities, employers are using that social media platform as a filtering process, right? You know, universities only have so many seats. Like if you're applying to go to the School of Medicine, maybe that university only has 500 seats, but they have 5,000 applicants who are applying. So they need to, you know, narrow the herd. And one of the ways they'll do that is look at social media. And we have found, we've had a couple of students who've taken our training who've actually earned scholarships because of how they're using their social media to leverage their position to say, look at me, this is who I am, this is why you want me to come to your college, your university, or your job.
That's right. If COVID has showed us nothing, what I've tried to say for years is we are a global market. You
Yep.
can work from, learn from anywhere. There's way too much competition out there, and you are the face of an organization once you belong to that organization, so they can be very picky. And they're, especially today, they're going to be extremely selective. And part of being selective is what you're doing online, which goes back to what we were saying earlier, your online and your offline meeting. You have to understand, they have to understand that. They have to understand that, and they have to leverage that. And not just for colleges and jobs, but for legacy. I often ask people, when I hear people say, well, what would you do if your mom or your grandma was behind you? And I say, well, what would you do if your child or your grandchild looked you up on ancestry.com?
Good point.
What is it you want the next generation of your family to know about you, their digital forefather? Because for the same reason that we all get excited over some black and white photo or some signature of someone we're related to 100 years ago, future generations are going to know who we were, especially since we are their digital forefathers. Like, we are a very special group of humans because we are alive in a very special time in history. And future generations are going to want to know who we were as their digital forefathers. So what is it you want them to know when they look you up?
This is why I've invited you on to Thinkable Thursday, right? Like, I just love, and I know that our viewers are going to love your thought process on this. Next question I have for you, Richard, is, depending upon where you're located in the world, TikTok is the #1 app being used by teens to consume or produce digital media. Are there concerns about TikTok that parents and teens should be aware of? Let's talk about that one.
Sure. So, like we were saying, with any app, there comes some risk. Right now, you probably heard a lot about China and TikTok, and there's a lot of thought and theory that, our data is going to China. Although I believe the gentleman he worked for Disney is now in charge of TikTok. There's no proof of that, but it is the U.S. government. They've asked people to take it off their phones. So that is something I guess is going to be fleshed out. I don't want to speak too much to that because there's not enough information for me to speak on that I'm aware of.
There is a court case in California taking place right now that should bring a lot of that to light.
Okay, good.
On that issue, right? Because I would agree with you. There's still not a lot of evidence there to support. Right. However, there's enough there that I think we should be aware.
Yeah, definitely. So we should definitely be monitoring that for sure, and that'll be an interesting case. So I won't speak to that. What I will say to any parent out there, and there's a lot more parents on TikTok these days. Like you said earlier, they are referred to as boomers. But I had it was in Houston. I had a parent ask me about TikTok, and they said their 7-year-old was on it, and I thought 7 years old, that's pretty young. I said, have you ever seen TikTok? And they said no. So my advice to that parent, and my advice to any parents watching this, is go on TikTok and spend about 20 to 30 minutes just scrolling what's called the For You page and see what you see and hear what you hear. Put the volume up. That's important. And what I think parents will find is that, back in the day when TikTok was formerly Musical.ly, before they were bought by ByteDance, and even in the early days of TikTok, it was a lot of very creative, and there are still very creative things on TikTok, some amazing creative animations and transitions and things that people do. But people are trying to become now what's called TikTok famous. And to become TikTok famous means you probably cannot have what's called a private account. You have to have it open to the world. And so what parents need to be aware of is, one, if their kids are on TikTok, one, they should just browse it. Take 20 to 30 minutes to browse it and see what you see and see what you think of what you see. And then two, see if your kids are trying to become TikTok famous, or are they using what's called a private account. Because where the risk comes in, again, it's how you use the app, is when people are doing things to try and gain followers to become TikTok famous. And the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what am I doing to become famous? Am I doing something that has cool special effects and transitions, and the creativity is why I'm getting attention? Or am I half naked dancing, and pushing the limits of what TikTok will allow?
Or
and
taking a bath in a basin in a Wendy's restaurant and then posting it online, and the kid's not understanding that TikTok is Google searchable and indexable. So not only did that young man lose his job, but anytime his name is Googled, that video is going to pop up.
Absolutely. So like any other social media platform, I would encourage parents to spend time, but more importantly, the difference between TikTok and a lot of other social media platforms out there is like, in YouTube, I guess would fall into this, is that people want to be famous.
Yeah.
Kids want to be famous. And today they can be famous. But the question is, what are they doing to try and become famous? And so there's a lot of kids who have thrown their settings, their privacy settings out the window, because they want as many people to see what they're doing. But when you do that, that frost I was talking about earlier, that window that I was talking about, you're completely wiping the frost away from that window. So what kind of attention are you calling to yourself?
You're the first person I've heard who's actually talked about TikTok looking at it from the reason why you're famous on TikTok. Is it because you're doing something that is questionable and, to be quite blunt, stupid? Or are you being that creator, that producer is doing really cool stuff? Again, it's not how the app. The other comment I make too is, be very careful about sexualizing any of your behavior within TikTok because of TikTok, what's called justification that is going on now, especially with young girls, where these guys are now taking these videos and then doing things on places in Reddit, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But you're the first person who I think has really kind of looked at TikTok more from a balanced perspective, because I find that a lot of people either like it or they hate it. I do have some concerns around privacy issues, especially when parents are downloading the app for the privacy settings on the parent's phone and about what it is harvesting off of that phone. That is what the court case in California is all about.
Yes.
But I do agree with you that there's some really cool things. Like, I don't know if you saw that TikTok where those young adults that were scientists dropped a chemical into a tub and this foam, like this foam came out of, like it was like a mountain of this. I mean, that is cool. And that became very popular, and they became very famous for doing that. But when you compare that to taking a bath in their Wendy's restaurant wash basin, like, come on.
Yeah, why?
Right? But,
so the question is, why are you on there? And this could, again, for parents to take an interest, communication. Why are you on there? Why do you have so many followers? Some people have not 100 or 200 followers. We're talking about thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of followers.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And what kind of risk are you bringing upon yourself to bring that followership? And
again, it's not the app, it's how you use the app.
Right. If one of the things that I always say, and again, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but one of the things that I refer to privacy settings as visibility settings or transparency settings, because I feel like it helps us think more clearly about what they really are. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because if you did a research, I tell kids all the time, if you don't know what MySpace is, look it up. And what you're going to find is that MySpace is a decades old app. It was, there's a lot of social media back then, but MySpace, it was the first Facebook, if you will. But what you're going to find if you actually research how people used MySpace is that people got in trouble with MySpace the same way they're getting in trouble today. Even when an app comes out and tells you the picture's going to disappear until someone screenshots it and throws it up online or on Reddit. My point is that in the course of decades, we haven't managed to change behavior. We've managed to change the name of the app. And until we start changing the behavior, it doesn't matter what the name of the app is. And it doesn't matter what the app says to you through its marketing it can do. You're still going to have people creating challenges for themselves because they have the wrong mindset on how to use it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about harm reduction.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's right.
That's what it's all about. Next question for you. Do youth have the right to privacy online from parental overwatch when it comes to their use of technology? You're welcome. What do you think? I mean, we hear this on. Let me set this up, right? We hear it all the time. We hear kids saying, "You're violating my privacy. I have the right to privacy when I'm on my phone and you don't." Well, I can tell you here in Canada and the United States, there is no such right. In fact, I hear some people quoting the United Nations child's rights, but if you actually look at the articles, it clearly says in there that parents can in order to keep kids safe, right? So, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, because I'm sure you get that question and comment from kids and parents.
Yeah, well, so this is a few ways I'll answer that. Number one, sometimes I'll say to parents, well, let me say this. I had a parent in California come up to me one time. Sometimes the best way to answer is through stories. I had a parent come up to me one time in California before a parent night. And she says, well, my daughter and her friends, they dance around in their room and they make these funny YouTubes, and sometimes they're in their, bikinis, sometimes they're in their underwear, but it's funny. It's like a girl pajama party. And these are middle school, I think it was middle schoolers. So I said to her, you know what, when we're done with the workshop, come talk to me. When we finished the workshop, her face was literally as white as the screen behind me. She could not believe, and the reason she was so paranoid and scared was because in her mind, only her daughter and her friends could see what she was doing. And it never crossed her mind prior to the workshop that predators or someone who might take an unhealthy interest in middle schoolers dancing around in underwear or pajamas in their bedrooms could be a problem. It never even crossed her mind. And one of the things that we had a conversation about was, well, what am I supposed to do? This is her YouTube account. And then I said, look, if you smelled smoke coming from underneath that door, would you open the door? And she said, of course I would. And I said, well, if you open up that door and they're smoking cigarettes or weed or whatever, it's between you and the 3 kids in that room. This is not going to be some global revelation. So if you would be willing to open the door because you're just checking in or you suspect something is wrong, why wouldn't you be willing to open like the digital door? Why, if you thought something was wrong, would you not be willing to check this? Because if they're doing something here, this is a door to the entire planet. This isn't just you and your kids at that point. So I often, I say to parents, of course, we want to give our kids some latitude and some privacy, but there also has to be limits to that. For the same reason I wouldn't give my kids the keys to the car and be like, see you later, do whatever you want. There are parameters, and I'm often going to be making sure that they're staying within those parameters. It's kind of the same principle. So, I believe parents, if they're paying for the phone and they're living in their house, just like they, should be able to open the bedroom door. With my son or my daughter, if I ask them to see their phone, part of the deal is I get to see their phone. Now, do I do that 24/7? Nope. But do I gauge their reaction if I ask them to see their phone? Yup. And reaction oftentimes will tell you a great deal. If they look nervous, why are they nervous?
And I do think that there is a difference between monitoring and spying, right? Like one of the things I say to parents is don't spy on your kids, monitor your kids, which means that the kids are engaging in that. I also believe that our kids have no right to privacy from us as parents until such time as they can prove to us they're being good digital citizens. Once they prove to us they're being good digital citizens, they've earned that right. So start to pull back, parents, on the issues surrounding monitoring. Continue on with the parental communication and participation, but kind of start to step back now because you need to cut that cord, but not until such time as they've earned that right. Comments?
Exactly right. So let's go back to the lady with the bedroom. So there's a difference between peeking through that bedroom keyhole and watching the kids all night long versus opening the door if you suspect something's going on, right? It's not constant spying. It's monitoring and using your wisdom as the adult to step in when you think it's needed.
And it's about being your child's best parent and not their best friend.
That's exactly right. So
right? There's a difference.
That's right. My kids had to meet certain parameters to get a phone, and it wasn't just online. It was also offline. What were their grades like? What is their, are they being honest? If my daughter can't be honest about feeding the cat, then can I give you a phone where you're not going to be honest about something you might have done online? Yeah. Are you, lashing out at your brother or your sister? Well, if you go off the handle that quickly at them, what's going to happen if you have a phone in your hand and you can go back at someone? Yeah. It's things like that to gauge their maturity levels. Every parent, every kid is going to be different. I
agree.
My kids totally are different people in their own ways. And so they had phones and have phones at different times. But it wasn't because one was older and one was younger, one was a boy, one was a girl. It was based on me gauging their maturity level and seeing how they were behaving without the phone. Would they be able to handle it if they had the phone?
Go ahead.
And if I could just add one other thing, if a parent is concerned about what their kids might be putting on a phone, I'm just going to go back to, I'm going to use video chat here as an example because we have a lot of kids on sites like Omegle and they're video chatting and their tagline is chat with strangers, right? It astounds me how many people are willing to close their blinds and lock their doors and then do something really inappropriate on a digital tool that connects you to a billion people. And one of the things that I try and help parents and kids understand is that, why are you locking the door and closing the blinds to do what you're about to do? Because you're worried that one person in your house might see it. You're about to do it on a tool that connects you to a billion people in a second. And I mean, did you really ever think of it that way? And so what I try and help parents do is talk to their kids like in a similar fashion, like, if you're going to do something that you think is going to make me upset, you're going to do it on a tool that connects you to billions of people, where it might not just be me that sees it, but there might be an entire planet of people that sees it. And at that point, there's nothing I can do as your parent to help you.
Or, like I demonstrated to a family just a couple of days ago, where kids are now going into places like Omegle and Seven Strangers and Cake, going in anonymously, wearing masks or blurring their cameras, not knowing that there are people out there that can still find you through a variety of different measures. I mean, as an investigator, I use those measures all the time. And those who want to exploit or predate our kids online are using the same techniques. And I demonstrate that to the kids, because a lot of kids think, well, I'm just using a VPN and I'm blurring out the camera, moving the camera. Nobody's going to know it's me. And I actually demonstrate that to them firsthand to show them how everything you do online, like you say, is public, it's permanent. But then I also say, public, permanent, searchable, exploitable, copyable, shareable, and a lot of times it's all for sale. Right?
That's absolutely true. And to your point, when kids say, "Nah, I'm totally anonymous," I try and help them understand, if you could just simply download an app and be anonymous. Like, if everyone on the planet could just simply download an app because the app told you through its marketing, which, by the way, their job is to make money off of you as marketers. I just want you to put that in perspective. If you had the ability to be completely anonymous, that means everybody does, just by downloading an app. Every criminal, every hacker, every terrorist. I mean, you think about what kind of world we would live in if you could literally do anything you wanted with no accountability because an app told you nobody can find you.
Though, Richard? There are some apps, Signal is a really good example of that. I mean, the Signal app right now, that's another concern. I'm all over privacy, but at what risk, right? And Signal right now is a not-for-profit publicly. I'm not sure if you know of that app. It's becoming quite popular. Why? Because there is no digital trail. Even if police get involved, there's just nothing there. And as a result of that, it is now becoming a place where those who want to prey on our kids, exploit our kids, do other criminal acts are now flocking to use as a tool in their toolbox, where maybe they'll groom the child on TikTok and then all of a sudden have them move over to Signal, to where they can now have that private communication without fear of being identified.
Right. And that's where the other side of that communication, that child that's being groomed, that is why, again, that communication is so important. It's so important, to realize they're being groomed and maybe, have the wherewithal, the mindset to know to take a screenshot with another phone and capture as much detail as possible. Or you're absolutely right. There is a point where technology, just because we can doesn't always mean we should. And that could be applied to many things in life. And that's a great example.
The truth. Chocolate donuts is a good example. Anyways, back on topic. Last question I have for you, Richard. Last question I have for you is, when it comes to keeping kids safe in the online world, what would be the most important advice you would give to parents, and why would you give that advice? Let's hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah. So at the risk of sounding redundant, what I always tell people is, you are using a tool of communication. The tool was built from the ground up for communication, and for the same reason we want to be able to communicate fast, and we want people to come back to us fast, right? Nobody wants to be left on red on Snapchat. You have to understand that. Basically, if you're going to use a tool for communication, you have to be okay with what you're putting on it being communicated. Again, it doesn't mean everything will, but you have to know that it can. But more importantly, again, as I said earlier, the mindset shouldn't be, oh my God, what if this does get communicated? But why wouldn't I want it to be communicated? One of the things that I always try and give is kind of an algorithm to try and help people understand this. When speed and convenience goes up with technology, and we see this happening every day, and we love technology for this. Why? The faster you can know anything, the faster you can talk to anyone, the faster you can save anything, the faster you can take a technology and open a window of opportunity, share your creativity, your activism with the world. You can get your point out to the world. This speed and convenience is a huge plus if you're using it with wisdom. Like your car will get you home faster than walking. if you're using it with wisdom. But here's what I don't think enough people understand. When speed and convenience goes up, levels of privacy will go down. And when you start abusing that speed and convenience, that power, this is when people start trying to hide things that could be catastrophic to them, and they start getting in trouble. For example, there's a lot of people who don't want to take the time to sign up on multiple sites and games. Why? Because it's a pain in the butt. Like, see if this sounds familiar to anybody watching this. You have to go to the site, you have to push sign up. Then you have to pick a username. You got to pray to God your username's still available and you're not going to add 4 numbers you're never going to remember. Then you have to do password. Then you have to do confirm password. Then you have to do email, cell phone, address, blah, 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 blah. And when you finally get to the bottom of the form, you're praying to God you did it all right. There's a CAPTCHA. Are you a bot? Pick all the boxes that have a car, and you're praying to God you get all the boxes right. But today, there's just a button you can push instead of doing all that nonsense. And you know what the one button is? You see it all the time. Log in with Facebook. Log in with Google. So what happened to your speed and convenience of logging in? Went way up when you pushed that button. What happened to your data? They sold it or shared it. It wasn't that long ago that you didn't have a data connection. You couldn't get online. Today, everybody's got Wi-Fi. Grandma, every Starbucks, everybody's got public Wi-Fi. As you know, public Wi-Fi gives everybody the speed and convenience of connectivity. You know what hackers are doing in an airport and a hotel with people on public Wi-Fi? They're looting them because it's unsecure and it's easy to hack. Privacy is going down. If you look online, there are a lot of examples of this happening. And so what happens is when apps come out and they start telling people through their marketing, your content is private, encrypted, anonymous, will disappear. So then they start creating things that could get them in trouble. Then all of a sudden they see that thing that's supposed to be private, encrypted, anonymous, and disappearing, rolling through social media, rolling through the dark web, being passed around the school, winds up in front of a parent, in front of a cop, in front of a teacher, or in the 10 o'clock news. Again, not everything, but a lot of it. And the reason for that is because people I don't think, understand that this is a tool that was built for communication. And for the same reason we want to be able to communicate fast, you have to know that if you're going to use 5G speed because it's better than dial-up, 5G speed will get that thing that makes you look awesome out faster. That's great. But you have to remember, if you're going to put something on that tool that has 5G speed you don't want the world to see, it still has 5G speed. So it can still get out faster. It works both ways, and you got to understand that.
Like what I like to say is, with convenience comes vulnerabilities. And often those vulnerabilities aren't well understood, and that is our role as educators, is to help people, especially parents and kids, understand those vulnerabilities. Because again, I think social media is cool. Look at, don't talk to strangers. Well, I'm doing that right now. I mean, if it wasn't for social media and technology, can you imagine what the kids would be going through during COVID right now? Yeah. Think about this, 20 years ago, what would have happened, right? I love technology. We use it. We're using it now to communicate with one another. It's convenient, but with convenience comes vulnerability, and we just need to be able to share those vulnerabilities in an enlightening and not necessarily a frightening way, right? Because some of this stuff can be very frightening. There's no doubt about it. And when we frighten, it shuts people down. So we need to enlighten without frightening to a degree, right? So
that's exactly right.
Any final comments on anything that we spoke about, Richard?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to echo your sentiments. We all know what a fire can do. We know how scary a fire can be, but we still use heat every single day. You see car crashes, collisions every day we get in our cars every day. Why? Because those tools bring us incredible convenience. The important part is having the mindfulness and the understanding of how to minimize your risk while you're using those things. And technology is no different. The reason I think that so many people have a problem with it is because it's new. And every day there's a newer form, there's a newer app, there's a newer device, and that is not going to change. Yeah. But what needs to change is the mindfulness that we apply, and that's what we at IROC are trying to do, is cultivate that mindfulness. And I thank you so much for what you do, because you clearly are doing the same exact thing. And as I always say, it takes a village. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with your audience today. I hope it helps.
Principles stay the same, diverse in application, as I like to say, right? So just hang on. I'd like to do a debrief with you, but I just want to do a closing with our audience. So I hope the audience today really got a lot of, like, wow, right? Like, I've known about Richard. This is the first time I've actually dealt with him face to face. We've interacted a little bit in social media, on a variety of different platforms, but I just really love what it is he does, because it echoes a lot of where our beliefs come from. We may deliver them a little bit differently, but again, principles stay the same, diverse in application. That's what makes us human and different with one another, right? But I mean, wow, right? Like, I hope you can see why I asked him into Thinkable Thursday. So again, I want to thank Richard and his organization IROC. Check them out online, Google them. They just got a ton of information on there as well, about all kinds of things, so you can take the time to go through and have a look at what he's doing, what his organization is all about. So on behalf of myself, I'm Darren, and Brandon, who's working behind in the control booth. He makes all this magic happen. As like I like to say, he's my digital Yoda. I'm his digital Padawan. Him and I fight back and forth now who the digital master is. He's truly my master. He is. He's good at what he does. But on behalf of the White Hatter, the entire team, I want to thank you for tuning in to Thinkable Thursday, and we'll see you next time.